Day 926 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 622,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,170 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 7 tanks, 9 APVs, 20 artillery, and 1 air defense system. And so apart from the high value air defense system target, it's been an otherwise slow day for hardware losses. But there is some nuance to this, because when heading to the map up until a few hours ago, there was a notable slowdown or halting of the Russian forces over the past 4 or 5 days. But then just a few hours ago, the Russian army went for a southern push in the Krasnohorivka direction. Now, the salient push itself is not of critical size, it might be 4 or 5 square kilometers, but the position can be critical for the AFU. Because if the Russian forces continue down west of the river, this can lead to an operational encirclement, which in turn means that it can lead to some of those tough decisions for the AFU, as previously mentioned. For instance, stay and risk defeat and capture, or withdraw, and also withdraw without risking any loss of soldier life. And of course, the reality for this map didn't spring up overnight, as it's been 9 months or so in the making, with the Russian Bulge just north of that area. Though it is an area which is made far more difficult for the AFU due to the rivers and lakes around it, leading to a small number of entry and exit points, all of which turns into a question of containment by the AFU, in terms of whether or not they can repel and even retake these positions by focusing their artillery fire and defense structures. And so meanwhile, we have these attritional mid-waves of the Russian forces, as per this Russian Yakut soldier, for instance, who complained, with a compound fracture, that he and his crew were provided with no help or even water, where he is now the only one left out of his former unit of 15. And same was the case with a Russian soldier now turned POW from a storm assault unit in this sector, with stating, quote, "The personnel is not very important, the main thing is to fulfill the task." Which is unfortunately not surprising and truly disgusting treatment, as the Kremlin will indeed continue to have this to the last Russian mentality. And then across on the map, as the fortunes were a little bit different in the New York front, where the AFU reclaimed some land just north of the settlement. Reports also have it that additional operations are underway to claim back some further land at this segment, though it is difficult to extract details on that front, especially given the remarkable levels of operational security that the AFU holds themselves to when they have an objective of an impending land liberation, or capture, as is the case with Kursk. So moving to Kursk, where the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade and the 152nd Motorized Rifle Brigade look to be performing a combination of replacing and reinforcing the Kursk pocket, with the new brigades said to be tailor-made for this mission due to being specifically trained, equipped and structured for reinforcing and securing the area, but also in terms of increasing mobility and firepower with enhanced artillery and indirect fire capabilities. Then for a moment, we'll head a little bit west to the heavily damaged bridge of the Sime River at Karij, because as we've become privy to, small vans, cars and motorcycles of the Russian army can still make it through, although still indeed not stable enough for larger heavy equipment. And so the Russians who filmed this probably shouldn't have done so, as it is likely now already back on the AFU's radar, where it might just come down to a case of reprioritization now. Where, for instance, the AFU is certainly focusing on the pontoon bridge constructions along the Sime River from the north to the south to support the Russian troops in the south, and of course the logistical units required to set them up. Then, not too far away on the map, we saw the interesting case of anti-drone cage equipped armoured vehicles of the Belarusian army, something we've not seen before, which was being sent to the southern border of Belarus, north of the Ukrainian border, as Belarus is surely attempting to get Ukraine to take their attention away from the Kursk front And yet, it's very likely another faint and bluff episode from the Belarusian dictator, everybody's favorite guy, Uncle Luka, who continues to showcase these movements, though likely at the request of Putin, as a form of a minimal contribution that he can provide to Russia. And although it's unlikely that anything will come from this, I should still state, just for the record, you can still never really rule out, for instance, Belarus choosing to commence and conduct military activities across the border, but only because it would be based on some very foolish and misguided decision making on their part. Because sometimes, unfortunately, you just have to account for the short-sighted military actions of another nation, where they recklessly open up a Pandora's box that they later wished they had simply never opened. Then taking a look around on the map, because somewhere in the east, Ukraine captured another Russian tank, a T-72B3 variant in the Kharkiv region. Noting that it's being towed by a previously captured TOS-1A heavy flamethrower. Then also, we saw Ukraine use their new thermite drones on the longtime Sinkivka front of northeastern Kharkiv, as it was aimed at Russian positions stationed there. So this new Dragon's Fire tool implemented by the AFU has evidently been upgraded for combat missions, in showing itself with daily use now since earlier this week on Monday or Tuesday. Starting to see a pattern here. Then also in the east and further east in Luhansk, where Ukrainian forces successfully hit a refueling point for a platoon of Russian tanks, destroying at least 4 Russian T-80 BVM main battle tanks, one of their finest tanks, all alongside a Mars fuel tanker. Then also in the east to show the hit on a Russian D-30 howitzer by the Omega unit. Then on the map, but to Russia, as a fire has broken out at a plastic manufacturing plant in the Tula Oblast, affecting an area of over 2,000 square meters. The plant, known for producing plastic containers and cases for the Russian military, is being attended by approximately 50 firefighters with 18 fire trucks on site. The cause of the fire remains unknown, though it does appear suspicious, with the facility also noted for manufacturing components for automobiles, machinery, and personal protective equipment. Then we'll head across to some news for today, as Romania presented Ukraine with the Patriot air defense system with an expected imminent delivery. This such system will be sent in its advanced configuration, which includes transport means, spare parts, maintenance equipment, and technical support. This Patriot also serves as one of 2 operational systems in use by Romania, with Romania expected to replace this system with another one from its foreign partners to maintain its own defensive capabilities, which in a way is basically like pushing these systems forward from the back closer to the wider Ukrainian and Russian front. Then in some more hardware news, the UK will supply 650 Martlet lightweight multi-role missiles to Ukraine as part of a new military aid package, with the delivery aimed at bolstering Ukraine's air defenses, and is something that was announced just before the Ukraine Defense Contract Group meeting at the Ramstein Air Base. So these versatile missiles made by Thales in Belfast can be launched from land, sea, or air platforms. Now, Ukraine has been utilizing these missiles since 2022, and so with a range of 5 to 8 kilometers, they work in combination with Ukraine's wider air defense systems, giving Ukraine what's known as a layered approach to air defense, which is, by the way, a quality within Russian air defenses that is fast becoming a lost capability. Then headed to some more news, as Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer has invited Ukraine and Russia to hold peace talks in Vienna, with him stating yesterday that the negotiations should occur without preconditions and on equal terms, emphasizing Austria's readiness to host the talks, offering Vienna as a venue due to its status as the seat of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. And I, for one, am a fan of getting Zelensky and Putin in the same room, as it would bring much needed reality to the situation, especially where Putin is concerned, a leader who never visits the front lines, unlike Zelensky who frequents them. But also where they enter these talks under the framework of no preconditions and on equal terms, as just mentioned, could be just what's needed to get Putin to sit down at the table on these matters. Of course, my expectation is that Putin will not be willing to cede any Ukrainian land once he gets there. But even so, the participation by these two would take on some monumentally international proportions, like a UFC fight night, but within the political arena. Then headed across to another Russian military mobilization blunder segment today, guys, though it is perhaps more blunder adjacent. So, Russian military journalist Alexander Sladkov has expressed concerns over declining interest in Russian military academies, as he revealed that applications to a prestigious military academy in Russia have plummeted to 0.8 per spot, which is less than one applicant per spot, which happens to be a stark contrast to past years where it used to be 20 applicants per spot. But then on top of that, cadets are reportedly resigning in large numbers, requesting to be sent home. All of which reflects the broader diminishing appeal of military careers despite social benefits and pay. Though it's not surprising really, because if you're in any way connected to the military in Russia, but not yet in Ukraine, you've probably been bullied into signing a contract to actually go to Ukraine. So it really speaks to the low morale, not just within the Russian military itself, but in the wider military adjacent sectors. Then headed across to a few 5-second funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So this first one speaks for itself, as Chechnya's Akhmat unit commander Abdi Alodinov said that Russia already won the SMO. Rather, instead, this one doesn't speak for itself. But hey, when you can't win your little SMO, you can always just simply state that you've won it as your go-to backup plan when things aren't going your way. Then to the next funny, Putin's squad is at it again. You might remember them, aka the Russian babushkas, in encouraging Russian boys, quote unquote, to keep fighting in Ukraine until victorious. These guys are not grassroots in their organization. I can tell you that much. Oh, but the flags and the t-shirts, extremely cringeworthy. Extremely cringeworthy. So how many sacks of potatoes would you need to wear one of those Putin shirts anyway? My guess is not much for these folks. Then to a quick final funny to round it all off for today, guys. So, in a sign of the Kremlin's panic for their impending long-term demographic collapse, Russia's State Duma is now calling for the mandatory requirement for companies to monitor the birth rates of its employees as a means to track and encourage higher fertility rates and support policies that bolster family growth. Isn't that sweet? But that's really just the official PR line. Because in reality, this crosses the awkward and dangerous line between personal privacy and state interference, and a policy that would create a climate of surveillance and discrimination where your fertility profile starts to become part of your employment evaluation. It's utterly ridiculous. I mean, what could come next? Compulsory pregnancy tests for women every Monday? Entirely farcical. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. As I always say, a bit of a broken record, but please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for the existing subscribers and all of the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!